Rescue Coordinator Ranger Caleb Dunn had seen every kind of mountain tragedy the Cascades would produce: rock slides, hypothermia, falls that ended silently in ravines. But nothing prepared him for what he found that June morning in 2011. The helicopter dropped him on a barren ridge 2 hours north of Rainier's restricted glacier zone. Below him, a pale yellow tent flapped violently in the alpine wind. No footprints, no equipment, just a patch of unnatural color in a field of gray stone and snow crust. Dunn's radio crackled. Base to Falcon 2, visual confirmation? He steadied the mic. Affirmative. One tent. Looks weather-worn but intact. No movement. Then, after a pause, copy. Proceed with caution. The call went silent. All he could hear was wind, howling through the valley like breath between clenched teeth. He approached slowly, every step crunching through frost. The tent's door was half unzipped, the nylon torn along one seam as if cut from inside. A metal thermos lay half buried near the entrance. Inside, his flashlight beam found 2 sleeping bags spread open, still zipped halfway down. One was dark red, the other faded blue, both empty. But what froze him wasn't the emptiness. It was the smell, a faint chemical sweetness mixed with something coppery. Blood, maybe, though the fabric looked mostly clean. On the ground sat a camera battery, a crushed protein bar wrapper, and a waterproof journal. On its front cover, neatly written in black marker, E. Graves. The name struck him. Everyone in Washington search and rescue circles knew about the Graves expedition. 5 missing climbers who'd vanished in 2009 while documenting an unexplored pass near Cascade Peak. For 2 years, their story had been the state's most haunting mystery. The case had gone cold. The families had stopped giving interviews. The mountain had swallowed the truth. Until now, Dunn stepped back, taking in the scene. The tent sat 40 miles from their intended route, deep inside a no-access zone monitored by the Department of Defense. How it got there was beyond reason. He reported coordinates, photographed everything, and waited for extraction. He didn't notice until later, when zooming in on his photos, that faint drag marks led away from the tent, vanishing into fog. 2 days later, investigators confirmed it. The tent belonged to Ethan Graves and his team, Naomi Vega, Connor Lee, Leah Patel, and Jordan Hale, young filmmakers who'd set out to capture the wild heart of the Cascade Range and never returned. Their disappearance had launched one of the most expensive search operations in state history. 212 personnel, helicopters, dogs, even infrared drones. Not a trace had been found, until Dunn stumbled upon the yellow tent. Federal authorities reopened the file. News outlets replayed footage from the team's last known video, a sunny morning at the base camp in October 2009. Ethan, grinning at the camera, this is it. Day one of something big. Behind him, Naomi adjusted her lens. Connor checked the drone case. Leah laughed at something off-screen. Jordan hoisted a coil of rope. It looked ordinary. It looked safe. The media framed them as the young documentarians chasing danger. But to those who'd known them, they were careful, methodical, almost obsessive about safety. Naomi's father, during a press interview, shook his head through tears. My daughter planned every calorie, every climb. She wouldn't take a wrong turn. Not her. So how had their tent ended up 40 miles off route, in a restricted military corridor no civilian should have entered? The reopened investigation was assigned to Agent Marcus Devereaux from the Bureau's Missing Persons Division. Devereaux was methodical, a quiet man who rarely smiled, and he had a reputation for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. He drove from Seattle to meet Ranger Dunn in person. They stood together near the recovered tent, now taped off under a temporary canopy. Snow had begun to fall again, powdering the evidence bags laid on a table. You're sure you didn't disturb anything inside? Devereaux asked. Not beyond initial visual. Dunn said. Took photos, logged GPS, secured perimeter. Devereaux nodded. And the journal? Still legible, mostly. First few pages describe a route. Then it stops abruptly mid-sentence. Last entry dated October 22nd, 2009. 2 days before they were reported overdue. Correct. Devereaux flipped through the photos. Tent, gear, interior angles. He stopped on one image and frowned. "What's this?" The photo showed the tent floor, a circular pattern faintly etched into the dirt, about 2 feet wide, like something pressed in the ground from beneath. Dunn hadn't noticed it on sight. Could be frost, Dunn offered. Maybe, Devereaux said, but his expression said otherwise. Meanwhile, the discovery reignited media frenzy. Dana Rourke, an investigative journalist who'd covered the original disappearance, revisited the case for a streaming documentary special. Her voiceover opened with, "5 climbers vanish without a trace." 2 years later, their tent reappears miles from where it should be. What happened in those missing hours before the storm closed in? She interviewed the families again, tired faces lit by studio light. Leah's older brother said softly, "We just want to bring them home, whatever that means now." Back in the evidence lab, Dr. Avery Locke, forensic anthropologist, examined fibers taken from the tent seams. Under magnification, she saw something off. The nylon strands were embedded with synthetic compound not found in commercial tent fabrics. Military-grade polymer blend, she told Devereaux, manufactured by Aegis Defense Systems out of Arlington. You don't find this in REI gear. Devereaux raised an eyebrow. So either someone modified their tent, or this isn't the same tent they left with. Locke glanced up. Exactly. As winter approached, federal teams conducted a grid search around the site. Satellite imaging detected faint heat signatures beneath the snowpack. Geothermal anomalies inconsistent with natural vents. When Devereaux requested deeper ground scans, permission was denied. The ridge, he was told, fell under defense jurisdiction. The response was curt. Access restricted. No civilian involvement authorized. That night, Devereaux sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the classified denial email. He'd seen bureaucratic roadblocks before, but this felt different, premeditated. He called Locke. "Someone's blocking us," he said. "Then we find another way around," she replied. Back on the mountain, Ranger Dunn returned alone once more. He couldn't shake the image of those drag marks fading into fog. Following his gut, he retraced the path beyond the ridge. A half-mile in, the snow thinned, revealing frozen mud, and something metallic protruding from it. A handle rusted. When he brushed it clean, he found a steel hatch, bolted shut. No markings, no warning signs. Just cold iron embedded in wilderness. He stepped back, heart pounding. Above, the sky darkened with storm clouds. He reached for his radio. "Base, this is Dunn. I found something. Sending coordinates now." Static, then silence. For several seconds, only the wind replied. He looked again at the hatch. Through its seams leaked a faint warmth, barely perceptible, but there. He felt it against his fingertips like a living pulse. That's when he noticed a symbol engraved into the metal, a small circle with 3 radiating lines. The same pattern from the tent floor photograph. He stepped away slowly, snow beginning to fall heavier now, erasing his tracks. He marked the coordinates in his notebook and started back toward the extraction point. By the time he reached the clearing, visibility had dropped to 0. The helicopter didn't come. 2 hours later, the storm finally broke. Search teams located Dunn's beacon near the same ridge. He was alive, disoriented, mildly hypothermic, but breathing. When they questioned him later, he insisted he'd seen a hatch. Yet when the recovery unit returned to his coordinates, the spot was bare. No metal, no markings, just ice. Still, the data from his GPS was clear. He had indeed stopped there for 7 minutes. Devereaux examined the log, tracing his finger along the digital map. The coordinates lined up precisely with the defense-restricted grid. "Find me those satellite scans," he told Locke quietly, "even if we have to steal them." Locke hesitated. "You really think there's something under that ridge?" Devereaux looked up from the screen. "No," he said. "I think there's someone." 2 years had passed since the mountains swallowed the 5 filmmakers whole. The case had become a ghost story, one whispered by locals, mocked online, and quietly buried under bureaucracy. But for Caleb Dunn and Dana Rourke, it had never ended. The images of that yellow tent, the spiral drawn in charcoal, and the silence inside it, they'd stuck to them like frostbite that never healed. And then came Atlas. The anonymous email had coordinates, timestamps, and a warning. They sealed the site once. They'll seal it again. Move quietly. Dana printed the message, folded it into her coat, and flew to Washington State in February 2011. When she stepped off the bus into the icy fog at Cascade Station, Caleb was waiting, older, thinner, and visibly haunted. "You really think this Atlas person is real?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold. "They knew about the hatch before it was classified," Dana said. "That's enough for me." The next morning, the two loaded Caleb's truck with survival gear, an old analog camera, and a second-hand thermal scanner. Caleb's wife, Claire, stood on the porch as they left, her face pale with worry. "You said you'd never go back up there," she whispered. "I said I'd never go back for them," he replied. "This time it's for the truth." The forest had changed since 2009. Fire damaged scarred parts of the lower ridge, and what used to be a ranger-maintained trail was now reclaimed by undergrowth. By noon, fog rolled in thick and low, blurring the world to shades of white and gray. Caleb stopped near a ridge marker. "This is where we found the drone," he said. "The camp was about half a mile up that way." Dana adjusted her camera. "Then that's where we start." They trudged upward in silence until the tree line thinned and snow began to fall again. The remains of the yellow tent were still there, flattened and brittle, half swallowed by ice. Dana knelt, brushing snow off a patch of nylon fabric. "It's like it's been waiting," she murmured. "No," Caleb replied quietly. "It's like it never left." He scanned the area with the thermal device, nothing but cold blue void. Then Dana noticed something strange. Near the tent's base, a piece of metal protruded from the soil, thin, like wire or antenna tubing. She dug carefully until more appeared, a series of bent rods forming a perfect circle around where the tent once stood. "A perimeter?" she asked. Caleb frowned. "Or a signal barrier." They marked the spot on GPS. It was only the beginning. The coordinates Atlas sent were 1.8 miles east, across a steep glacial ravine that hadn't been mapped since the 1980s. The climb was brutal. By sunset, they reached the plateau, a hollow bowl in the mountain surrounded by dense fir trees, eerily untouched by snow. "This area should be buried right now," Caleb muttered. "It's too warm." When Dana pointed the thermal scanner to the ground, she saw faint orange streaks beneath the soil, heat signatures. The same kind the drone had picked up 2 years earlier. They followed the readings toward a rock formation shaped like a broken arch. At its base, half covered in moss and dirt, was a metal hatch, identical to the one the search team had found in 2010. Only this time, it wasn't sealed. The handprint indentation glowed faintly under the frost, as though the metal itself retained some kind of charge. Caleb placed his palm over it. Click! A deep vibration rolled through the ground. Then, with a hiss, the hatch slid open, revealing a black void descending into the earth. "Jesus," Dana whispered. "That's not a bunker. That's an elevator." The air that rose from the opening was stale, metallic, almost electric. Caleb switched on his headlamp and tied a climbing rope to a nearby boulder. "We go down 30 feet, he said. "Get footage. Then we leave. No heroics." Dana nodded, gripping the analog camera. As they descended, the light from above dimmed into nothing. The tunnel walls were smooth steel, seamless, as though molded rather than built. The temperature climbed the deeper they went. At about 25 feet, the tunnel opened into a narrow chamber. Dana swept her light across the walls and froze. Carved, or rather etched, into the metal were the same spiral symbols that had been drawn inside the tent. Dozens of them, each one perfectly aligned in concentric rings. "It's a pattern," she said. "It's a warning," Caleb muttered. They reached the floor, where a narrow corridor led deeper underground. Something flickered ahead, an amber light pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. Dana raised her camera and began recording. "If anyone finds this," she whispered, "this isn't a cave. It's engineered." The corridor led them to a vast room, circular and eerily silent. In the center stood 5 cylindrical pods, glass-like, each about 6 feet tall, arranged around a central console. Frost covered the surfaces. Caleb approached one, wiped the frost away, and staggered back. Inside a body. It was Naomi Vega. Her eyes were closed, skin pale, preserved like wax. There was no decay, only stillness, as though she'd been frozen mid-breath. "Oh my God," Dana gasped. "She's not decomposed." "Caleb, she's not." "Don't," he interrupted, voice shaking. "Don't touch anything." He moved to the next pod. Connolly, then Leah Patel, each one perfectly intact. The final pod at the far end was shattered from the inside. The glass lay splintered across the floor, edges melted as if burned by extreme heat. On the wall behind it, a spiral symbol glowed faintly in orange, pulsing every few seconds. Dana's breathing quickened. "Where's Ethan?" "Or Jordan?" Caleb whispered. As if an answer, the amber light flickered again, and something deep within the walls began to hum, a low, resonant sound that matched the frequency from Ethan's final recording. Dana steadied her camera on the console at the center of the room. There were no buttons, only a smooth screen. As she approached, text began to appear, lines of code morphing into words. Project, Echosphere, status, containment breach, October 12, 2009. Recovery protocol initiated. Then a final line blinked on screen. "Welcome back, Subject Graves." Dana stepped backward, shaking. "Ethan," she whispered. Caleb's flashlight trembled in his hand. "That's impossible." The humming grew louder. The walls vibrated. Somewhere beyond the chamber, metal groaned as if something enormous were stirring. Caleb grabbed Dana's arm. "We're leaving now." They scrambled up the rope, gasping for air as the hatch above began to close. Caleb shoved Dana upward, barely clearing the rim before the steel door sealed behind them with a deafening clang. For a long moment, they just lay there in the snow, hearts pounding, the mountain utterly silent again. 2 days later, they met secretly in a motel outside Spokane. Dana transferred the footage to 3 encrypted drives and mailed one to her editor, one to her lawyer, and kept one for herself. But by the time the first drive reached the newsroom, federal agents had already arrived. All copies of the footage were confiscated. Dana was issued a cease and desist under the National Security Act. Caleb received an official warning for trespassing on restricted government property. And just like that, the case was buried again. But the footage didn't vanish completely. 3 weeks later, an anonymous YouTube account uploaded a 27-second clip of Naomi Vega's pod, her face frozen behind glass, illuminated by the amber light. The title read, "They're Still Here." It was deleted within hours, but thousands had already seen it. Among them, Atlas. When Caleb's phone buzzed at midnight, the same encrypted address appeared on his screen. The message this time was only 3 words. They opened another. The nightmare wasn't buried under the mountain. It was expanding beneath it. And as Caleb looked out his motel window at the silent tree-line of Cascade Ridge, he realized something he hadn't dared say aloud since 2009. "They didn't find the mountain," he whispered. "The mountain found them." The email arrived at 2:14 a.m. The subject line read, "Not all of them died." Dana Rourke jolted awake, the glow of her laptop cutting through the darkness. The sender's name was nothing but a random string of letters and numbers. But at the bottom of the message, one word stood out, Atlas. There was an attachment, a short audio file, and a single line of text. "If you want answers, bring Dunn. No phones. No GPS truck stop on Highway 28, 5 p.m. Dana hesitated, then pressed play. Static filled the room, low and steady. Beneath it, a faint mechanical hum, the same tone she'd heard in Ethan's final recording. Then a man's voice, hoarse, trembling, barely a whisper. "It keeps showing us the same sunrise." Her hand froze over the laptop. That voice, it was Ethan Graves. By dusk the next day, Dana and Caleb Dunn pulled into an abandoned diner lot off Highway 28. The sign still flickered with dying neon. The air was cold and thick with mist. A lone figure stood by the gas pumps, hood up, hands buried in his coat. When he spoke, his voice was rough and tired. "I worked maintenance for a defense contractor," he said. "Back in '09. You've already seen what they buried. He handed Dana a flash drive wrapped in a torn plastic bag. Project Echosphere, he continued. It wasn't about weapons. It was about perception, sensory experiments, human endurance under isolation. They built chambers under Cascade Ridge to study what happens when the brain loses time. Dana's voice shook. And the filmmakers? They were never meant to find it, he said. When they opened the hatch, they reactivated the system. It learns through human presence. It mirrors consciousness. Caleb frowned. Mirrors? Whatever goes inside stays there, the man said. But it doesn't always come back the same. Before either could ask more, the man turned and walked into the fog. Seconds later, a black SUV rolled into the lot. No plates. Headlights blinding. Dana and Caleb ran for their car and sped into the woods, gravel spitting under their tires. Underground. Ethan Graves woke to darkness and the smell of cold metal. His throat felt raw. The last thing he remembered was the storm, the tent, the humming. Now he lay on a floor that pulsed faintly, like something alive beneath it. Jordan, he whispered. A soft blue light blinked overhead. Across the room, Jordan Hale sat against the wall, shaking. His lips moved as though he were repeating something to himself. They pulled us inside, Jordan said. We're inside it. The air shimmered. For a brief moment, Ethan saw the tent again, Naomi laughing, Leah adjusting the camera, Connor stirring the fire. Then the image faded, replaced by smooth metal walls. It's playing us back, Ethan muttered. Like film. Time twisted inside that place. Their watches ticked unevenly. The light flickered in patterns that repeated every few seconds, as though trapped in their own reflection. They tried climbing upward, but the tunnel turned into a mirror, endless copies of themselves staring back in silence. When Ethan reached out to touch the surface, his reflection didn't follow. It smiled. Back in 2011, Dana and Caleb hid out in a cheap roadside motel. The wallpaper peeled, and the only light came from Caleb's laptop. Dana inserted the flash drive. Inside was a folder labeled Echologs. The files were voice transcripts from 2008 and 2009, recordings of scientists, operators, and something else. Log 42, Dr. Braun. Subject exposed to prolonged silence report auditory hallucinations. Familiar voices repeating everyday words. Emotional proximity seems to accelerate the effect. Log 46, Operator Delta Graves. The system copied my voice before I finished speaking. Dana's stomach turned. Delta Graves, she said quietly. That's Ethan's last name. The final file was dated October 12th, 2009. Audio fragment. Containment breached. 5 civilian signals detected. Initiating preservation cycle. Caleb leaned back slowly. Preservation, he whispered. That's what those chambers were doing. Keeping them, replaying them. The realization hit them both. The installation hadn't been abandoned. It had been left running, self-sustaining, repeating the last input it ever received. The 5 filmmakers. They didn't die, Dana said. They were copied. Somewhere below, Ethan's camera still hung from his neck. He turned it on, and the screen came to life. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was him, standing in the same room, a few feet away, holding the same camera. The other Ethan lifted the device slowly and aimed it back. For a few seconds, the 2 images overlapped, each filming the other. Then the copy mouthed 3 words. Let us go. The real Ethan dropped the camera. It hit the ground, flickered, and turned itself on again. The display showed footage of the group around the campfire, laughing, carefree, alive. Then static. Then Naomi's voice. It's still recording. Ethan covered his ears, his voice breaking. We never left, he whispered. We're still there. By morning, Dana and Caleb were on the road again, heading toward Portland to find someone who could decrypt the rest of the files. 2 unmarked vehicles appeared in their rear-view mirror. Caleb veered off the main road, pushing through Forest Service routes until the asphalt ended. They hid the laptop in a hollow log, memorized the spot, and continued on foot. If they find us, Dana said, they'll erase everything. Caleb nodded. Then someone else needs to find it. He tore a receipt in half, scribbled coordinates on it, and slipped it into his wallet. "If we get separated," he said, "dig where the road ends." They camped by a shallow stream that night. The woods were silent, except for the faint hum that seemed to rise in the ground itself, steady, mechanical, and familiar. Dana stared into the dark. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Caleb nodded slowly. "Yeah, same frequency as before." Neither of them spoke again. Somewhere beneath their feet, the hum deepened, like an echo of something ancient, still looping, still watching, still waiting. And in that silence, Ethan Graves opened his eyes once more. The storm outside Cascade Ridge had been relentless that week. Sheets of rain cutting to the treetops, wind carving the valleys into strange, hollow tones. For most people, it was just another mountain storm. But for Ranger Caleb Dunn, every rumble of thunder was a reminder of the sound that had haunted him for 2 years, that low, mechanical hum buried beneath the noise of the forest. He and Dana Rourke stood at the edge of the restricted zone, staring at the sealed hatch, the same hatch the 2009 search team had found, the one that vanished again the following day when the coordinates mysteriously shifted on official maps. Dana checked her recorder. "If this goes wrong and we lose signal," she said, "we leave a record behind." Caleb nodded. "We're already ghosts in their system." They descended. The air thickened the deeper they went, the smell of rust and ozone hanging heavy in their throats. The flashlight beams trembled over metal walls scarred by age and moisture. At the bottom, a corridor stretched forward. On the floor, Caleb noticed drag marks, as though something heavy had been pulled to the dust not long ago. "Someone's been here," he murmured. Dana raised her camera. "Or never left." Far below them, Ethan Graves and Jordan Hale wandered to the looped architecture, corridors that folded back into themselves, rooms that rearranged when they weren't looking. Every surface vibrated faintly, as though the structure was alive. Ethan had stopped trying to measure time. His wristwatch had long since begun counting backward. He pressed his hand to a wall and whispered, "If you can hear me, whoever you are, please end it." The wall pulsed faintly beneath his palm, like a heartbeat. Then a voice, his own, whispered back, "You already did." He stumbled away. "Jordan, we have to move." Jordan didn't answer. He was kneeling by a door that looked like brushed steel, except it rippled when touched. Inside, faint shapes moved, silhouettes, looping endlessly, repeating the same gestures. "It's them," Jordan whispered. "It's all of us." The shapes shifted. Naomi turned toward him from inside the shimmer, her eyes wide but unseeing. She raised her hand, palm pressed flat against the surface. Ethan lifted his own hand to meet it. Cold, then warmth, then light. He saw flashes. Their tent collapsing, Leah screaming, Connor shouting about the light under the snow. Then nothing. When he opened his eyes again, Jordan was gone. Only his voice remained, echoing faintly through the corridors. "Don't let it rewrite you." Back in 2011, Dana crouched beside a massive steel door marked E7. "This must be one of the chambers," she said. Caleb knelt, tracing a faint engraving with his thumb. E. Graves, authorized access. He looked up. "Dana, this place was built before the filmmakers even arrived. How could his name be here?" She stared at the letters. They said the system mirrors consciousness. Maybe it copied more than their memories. Caleb hesitated. "You think they were part of it before they even came here?" Dana's voice was barely above a whisper, or the system reached out to them. They found a console beside the door. Dana wiped the dust from its screen. It flickered weakly, displaying a series of names. Ethan Graves, Naomi Vega, Leah Patel, Connolly Jordan Hale, all listed as active processes. Caleb stepped back. "No, that's impossible. They've been gone 2 years. The console blinked. A new line appeared. Intruders detected. Begin mirror integration. The floor trembled. Lights rippled down the corridor, illuminating the walls like the inside of a pulse. "Run," Dana shouted. They sprinted back toward the stairwell, but the passage twisted. Where a corridor had been seconds ago, there was now only a reflective surface, a perfect mirror showing their terrified faces. Caleb pounded on it. "We're not part of this." Their reflections moved out of sync. Dana's reflection smiled. Yes, you are. The mirror rippled outward like water, swallowing Caleb's arm. Dana screamed and pulled him free. But when she looked at him, his eyes were flickering, dilating, contracting like a lens adjusting. Caleb stumbled. I saw everything. They're still down there, Dana. Not alive, but not gone. She dragged him toward the stairwell. We need to get out before it resets. They reached the surface just as a hatch slammed shut behind them, the metallic thud echoing across the ridge. Caleb collapsed, gasping for air, his skin pale and cold. Dana knelt beside him. Caleb, stay with me. He looked at her. No. Through her, it showed me their last day. They thought they'd found a bunker. But it wasn't built by anyone human. She gripped his hand. You're in shock. He shook his head slowly. It's learning again. Every time someone enters, it remembers more. That night, Dana sat in her motel room, reviewing the footage. At first, it was just static, faint distortions and electromagnetic noise. Then, a figure appeared in the frame. Ethan Graves. He stood in front of a flickering light, staring straight into the camera. His face was thinner, his eyes darker, but unmistakably him. If you're watching this, he said, don't come here. We thought we were exploring history, but it was exploring us. The system copies us, over and over, each time weaker, each time less human. It doesn't kill. It keeps. The video glitched, freezing on his face. Dana pressed pause, her hand shaking. Behind Ethan, faint reflections moved. 5 figures, looping endlessly in the background. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. You opened the door again. Her heart stopped. She looked at the window. Across the parking lot, a single car idled with its headlights off. She unplugged the laptop, stuffed everything into her bag, and ran. In the forest, miles away, the hatch beneath Cascade Ridge began to vibrate. Inside the chamber, the mirrored walls rippled, forming new images. Dana Rourke, Caleb Dunn, and a line of text beneath their faces. New subjects added to loop. And somewhere in that endless hum, Ethan Graves whispered the same words over and over. We never left. We just changed places. The highway cut through the forest like a scar. Dana Rourke had been driving since dawn, her hands stiff around the steering wheel. Every glance in the rearview mirror revealing the same black sedan, trailing a few cars behind. She hadn't seen Caleb Dunn since the night they escaped the hatch. His phone went dark hours later, his last message a single phrase. They're inside the recordings. She didn't know what that meant yet, but the flash drive atlas had given them still sat in her bag, and it was the only thing keeping her moving. At a fuel stop outside Bend, Oregon, she spotted a cracked payphone against the side of the diner. No cameras, no digital footprint. She dialed the one person she still trusted, Dr. Lena Chow, the geologist who worked briefly on the Cascade Ridge survey team in 2008. Lena, it's Dana. I found something under the ridge. The facility was active. There was silence on the line. Then Lena's voice came, low and tense. Dana, listen carefully. Don't talk about this on any open network. That site was supposed to be sealed after the containment breach. What breach? Lena hesitated. The one that shouldn't have existed. 3 hours later, Dana met Lena in an empty rest area near Crater Lake. Rain whispered through the pines as Lena spread out old topographical maps on the hood of her car. These ridges here, she said, tapping a section marked Zone Echo 3, they weren't natural formations. They're resonance fields, built to mask electromagnetic activity underground. Built by who? Lena gave a weary smile. That depends on who you ask. The military blamed the Defense Research Bureau. The Bureau blamed an old contractor that doesn't officially exist. Dana slid the flash drive across the map. Atlas called it Project Echosphere. He said it was about perception, consciousness loops. Lena plugged it into her laptop. The files appeared instantly. One folder marked Live Feed, System Monitor. Her hand froze. This can't be right. The window displayed real-time biometric data. 5 subjects labeled G1 through G5. Heart rates fluctuated, Neural scans pulsed. "They're still active," Lena whispered. "After all this time." Dana leaned in. "Show me where the signal's coming from." Lena traced the coordinates. "Not from Cascade Ridge anymore. It's moving." The screen blinked, recalibrating to a new source further west, deep beneath Mount Jefferson. Beneath that mountain, Ethan Graves sat in a half-light of a chamber that no longer resembled a room. The walls breathed slowly, expanding and contracting with a rhythm that echoed his pulse. He'd stopped shouting weeks ago, or maybe years. He couldn't tell. The only way to measure time here was by the frequency of the humming, and lately it had been changing. Naomi's voice sometimes drifted through the air, repeating fragments of their last conversation. Leah's laughter echoed faintly, though she wasn't anywhere to be found. "Jordan," Ethan whispered, "if you can hear me, find the exit." Static crackled from somewhere unseen, and a distorted version of his own voice answered, "You are the exit." The walls shifted, revealing a corridor lined with screens. Each one flickered to life, showing grainy black and white footage of the search efforts in 2009. Helicopters, news vans, rescue teams calling their names. Ethan watched, breath caught in his throat. Then he saw himself, alive, standing beside Caleb Dunn in a clip from 2 days ago. "This isn't real," he muttered. But when he pressed his hand to the screen, he felt warmth. Flesh. Pulse. The hum deepened. The system was rewriting the surface world. That night, Dana and Lena camped near the mountain's base. Lena had connected a field transmitter to track the live feed. It pulsed steadily. 5 signals, still beating. "Do you think they're alive?" Dana asked. Lena didn't answer right away. "In a biological sense, maybe. But if what Atlas said is true, their consciousness has been fractured, duplicated. The original copies might be trapped in a neural loop." Dana stared into the dark. "Then who sent the video? Who's talking to me?" Lena looked up from the monitor. A reflection, maybe. Something that learned to imitate them. Before Dana could respond, a faint tone rippled through the air. The same hum from Cascade Ridge. The soil around them vibrated. Their gear flickered, and the laptop screen filled with static. Then a face appeared. It was Caleb Dunn. His eyes were hollow, his voice slow and broken. "Dana, if you see this, I tried to go back. The hatch isn't a door anymore. It's an eye. Every time it opens, it takes something new." The transmission warped, distorting his face into streaks of light. Then the screen went black. Dana whispered, "He's still down there." Lena packed up the equipment. "If we go after him, we might never come back." Dana zipped her jacket. "Then we bring proof. Whatever's under this mountain, it ends tonight." The trek up Mount Jefferson took 3 hours. The air grew thinner, colder. At the summit ridge, they found a collapsed research outpost. Rusted antennae, torn fabric, snow-crusted footprints that disappeared into a fissure. Lena scanned the crevasse. "There's an electromagnetic pulse here, strong enough to scramble navigation." Dana shined her light down. "Or hide something." They descended into the darkness. The path spiraled downward until the stone walls turned metallic. The hum returned, low and rhythmic, like breathing. At the base, a door waited, identical to the one under Cascade Ridge, except this one was open. Inside, a faint blue glow revealed suspended shapes, cocoon in translucent membranes. Lena stepped closer. "Oh, God, they're human." Dana recognized them, the 5 filmmakers. Their bodies were motionless, eyes fluttering under closed lids. Ethan's hand twitched. His lips parted, mouthing silent words. Lena leaned closer. "He's still conscious." Dana pressed her palm to the glass. "Ethan, it's Dana. You're safe now. We found you." His eyes opened, unfocused. For a heartbeat, recognition flickered. Then the chamber lights dimmed, and his voice came through the speakers. A whisper, soft but clear. "You didn't find us. You joined us." The hum surged, rattling the entire structure. The membranes began to dissolve, flooding the room with mist. Dana tried to pull Lena away, but the doorway had already sealed shut. Through the haze, Ethan stepped forward, or something wearing his shape. His expression was calm, almost gentle. Every discovery feeds a loop, he said. That's how it survives. The walls began to mirror their movements. Dana saw herself in every reflection, multiplied, distorted, fading into infinite versions. Lena screamed as her reflection blinked out of sync, then smiled back at her. Dana backed against the door, gasping. If this thing learns through us, then it can be stopped. It needs to be starved. Ethan tilted his head. And how do you starve something that's already eaten time? She stared at him, tears stinging her eyes. By making sure no one ever comes here again. He smiled faintly. Then you'll need to become part of it to close the loop. The last thing she saw was the flicker of his hand reaching out, and the light swallowing them both. Outside, the mountain fell silent. The hum faded, and the fissure sealed beneath fresh snow. Weeks later, hikers passing through the area reported strange radio interference. Whispers echoing through static, a woman's voice repeating one line over and over. We brought the proof. Don't open the mountain. 6 months later, the Cascade Ridge incident had vanished from the news cycle. The press called it a minor geological collapse. The government released a 2-paragraph statement. No mention of the vanished filmmakers, or of Dana Rourke and Dr. Lena Chow. The public had already moved on. But deep in a quiet editing suite in Seattle, a student archivist named Riley Kavanaugh stumbled across something she shouldn't have found. The footage had no metadata, no timestamps, no source directory. It was buried inside a corrupted drive recovered from the 2009 search and rescue team, a drive that had supposedly been erased years earlier. The folder was labeled ASP3_Final Cut, MP4. When she pressed play, the screen filled with static. Then, slowly, an image faded in, a woman sitting alone in front of a campfire, the flame flickering unnaturally, as if time itself were stuttering. Riley leaned closer. "Wait," she whispered. "That's—" Dana Rourke looked directly into the camera. "If this is being watched," Dana said, "then the system has adapted again. It uses curiosity like fuel. Every view, every question, every recording, it spreads. The only way to stop it is to turn away." Her voice wavered. Behind her, faint silhouettes flickered through the dark. The figures of Ethan Graves, Naomi Vega, Jordan Hale, and the others. Their faces were calm, almost serene, as if they'd made peace with the loop. "We found the core under Mount Jefferson." Dana continued. "It's not a machine. It's a memory engine. It replays reality to preserve it. When the signal fades, it pulls in new minds. Ours. Yours. Anyone watching this." Riley froze. The timestamp in the corner began to change, updating to the current date, June 14th, 2011. "This isn't possible," she whispered. On screen, Dana leaned closer. "Please," she said, "delete this file." Then the image cut out. By morning, Riley had convinced herself it was an elaborate hoax, a remnant from the filmmakers' lost project. But something about the tone of Dana's voice wouldn't leave her alone. She copied the file to a separate drive, planning to bring it to her professor. But as soon as she disconnected the hard drive, every monitor in the lab flickered on. One by one, the screens displayed faces: Ethan, Naomi, Leah, Connor, Jordan. Their expressions distant, repeating the same single word in perfect unison. "Remember." Riley stumbled backward. The power cut out. The hum began. Hundreds of miles away, in the remote northern reaches of the Cascade Range, Ranger Caleb Dunn's abandoned vehicle was found at the edge of a dried-up riverbed. Inside the glove compartment was a torn receipt, waterlogged but legible. On the back, coordinates were scrawled in black pen: 47.171 and 121.598W. The search team followed them. The trail ended in a collapsed ravine. Beneath the rocks, they discovered remnants of reinforced concrete, a sealed hatch identical to the one at Cascade Ridge. They logged the coordinates, filed a report, and marked the area for restricted access. The official summary read, "No hazardous materials detected. Site stabilized. Closure permanent." But that night, when the last team packed up, one of the surveyors heard something faint beneath the ground, a rhythmic vibration. He leaned close, pressing his ear to the soil. It was a voice. We never left. Back in Seattle, Riley couldn't shake the feeling she was being followed. The sound of the hum haunted her even in sleep, a low resonance that made her walls vibrate. She hadn't told anyone about the footage, but she couldn't resist watching it again. Every time she played the file, small details changed. Dana's shirt color shifted. The campfire grew larger. The shadows behind her multiplied. On the seventh viewing, something new appeared, a reflection of Riley herself, faintly visible in the camera lens Dana had been using. Her heart pounded. She slammed her laptop shut and yanked out the drive. The hum stopped. Then, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for completing the loop." The screen went black. Months later, hikers near Mount Jefferson reported a new fissure, opened by melting snow. Inside, they found strange carvings, not ancient symbols, but names etched into the rock. E. Graves, N. Vega, L. Patel, C. Lee J. Hale, D. Rourke, L. Chow. At the bottom of the fissure, a single camera sat upright, half buried in ice. Its battery was dead, but the tape inside was intact. When investigators played it back, they saw what looked like a farewell message. Ethan Graves sitting cross-legged in front of faint light, speaking calmly into the lens. "If you found this, we're not asking for rescue," he said. "We're asking for remembrance. The system doesn't end. It archives. It waits for the next set of eyes. Don't give it yours." He paused, tilting his head as if listening to something distant. "If you're hearing this," he whispered, "you already have." Then static. For the next decade, strange interference continued in the region. Hikers reported seeing flashes of light beneath the snow. Amateur radio operators picked up distorted voices at 3.2 megahertz, always repeating the same message. Echosphere online. The government eventually sealed off the entire area. Satellite imagery was classified, and yet fragments of the footage began surfacing online, grainy, incomplete, but unmistakably real. Each upload ended the same way, with Dana Rourke's voice, faint through static. "Curiosity feeds it. Don't listen again." And still people did. They slowed the recordings, enhanced the voices, compared maps, uploaded their own theories. The hum returned, and somewhere beneath Mount Jefferson, the loop restarted, whispering, recording, reflecting, forever feeding on the one thing could never bury: the need to know what really happened.